Good morning and welcome to the annual stockholders meeting of ACEN. We will start this meeting with an invocation to be followed by the Philippine National Anthem.
Accept our thanks for this day and all its blessings, opportunities, and challenges. Guide and direct our company, its leaders, and our actions. Grant that each of us may feel our responsibility to our stockholders, to our community, and to our country. May we be challenged to give our best always, and may you bless our meeting today. Amen.
Bayang magiliw, Bernes na sinamana, alam na puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyang ka ng magiging, sa manlulupi, di ka pagsisisi, sa dagat at bundok, sa siwi at sa langit mamuka, may nilagang tula at angit sa pangalan binaha, ang kisap lang matawad mo'y tagumpay na napiligid, ang bituin at araw niyang kanyang kamay di mag-idinig, lupa na araw na natin pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya lamang may nakaapi, ang mamatay ng alis sa'yo.
This is about reimagining the ACEN journey. We've grown tremendously over the last few years, and yet the world is just at the beginning of the energy transition.
We are now in a climate crisis. The world is shifting to cleaner technologies, but not fast enough. This is a wake-up call to accelerate the energy transition.
The entire organization is fully committed to ACEN 2030. ACEN 2030 is our vision to reach 20 gigawatts of renewables by 2030. The supply from the country's major gas field is declining, and the industry is heavily reliant on coal imports, which have become expensive. Energy security is a key risk, and it's imperative for the Philippines to accelerate its renewables build-out.
Vietnam has significantly scaled up solar and wind over the last few years, although the grid is now challenged to manage all the intermittent capacity. Power demand is also staging a strong recovery, and soon the country would have to resume its renewable expansion and incorporate energy storage.
The energy transition is in full swing in Australia. Most of the coal plants will be retired within the next 2 decades. We expect much of this capacity to be replaced by renewables and energy storage. Australia aspires to be a global leader in green hydrogen exports, which will require massive scaling up of renewables capacity.
Scaling up renewables won't be easy. On-demand availability will be a key challenge, so we need a significant buildup of energy storage to unlock the potential of renewables. We expect land and transmission limitations in most markets, so we need to start leveraging new technologies, such as floating solar and offshore wind.
Partnership has always been in ACEN's DNA. While we build our organic development capabilities, we will continue to work with various partners to accelerate our growth.
Dreaming big and having strong conviction that we will succeed, this is the ACEN way. Will we make it?
Well, we've consistently delivered in the past, so yes, I believe we will. I believe that it's not a matter of whether we will get there, but rather how fast we will get there.
Let us welcome Mr. Delfin Lazaro, Chairman of the Board of Directors, for the opening remarks.
Good morning. The meeting will please come to order. It's my pleasure to welcome our stockholders to the 2023 Annual Stockholders Meeting of ACEN Corporation. Each year, we look forward to this opportunity to engage with our stockholders. Pursuant to our bylaws and after giving our stockholders the opportunity to request for a physical meeting, this meeting will be conducted in a fully virtual format. Advancements in technology, driven primarily by the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, have made virtual meetings the new normal in today's world. Aligned with ACEN's continued efforts to keep abreast of these technological advancements, in holding this meeting in a virtual format, we do our best to ensure the convenient and full participation by our stockholders in this annual meeting. And we are guided by good governance objectives, particularly to fully respect and protect our stockholders' right to vote and be informed. Our stockholders may exercise their right to vote through proxy forms submitted by April 12, 2023, or through electronic voting that is available until the end of the meeting. Questions are encouraged and may be sent to corpsec.acen@aceenergy.com.ph. Joining me in this meeting as presenters are John Eric Francia, our CEO and President, Solomon M. Hermosura, our Corporate Secretary, and Doji D. Lagaso, Assistant Corporate Secretary. Our independent directors, namely Sherisa P. Nuesa, our Lead Independent Director and Chairperson of the Board Risk Management and Related Party Transaction Committee, Consuelo D. Garcia, the Chairperson of the Corporate Governance and Nomination Committee and Personnel and Compensation Committee, Maria Aurora Jotina Garcia, the Chairperson of the Audit Committee, and Melinda L. Ocampo. The other members of and nominees to our board, our other officers and representatives of SyCip Gorres Velayo and Company, our external auditor, who will also validate the voting results, are joining the meeting through the live webcast. Before we proceed, let us establish that this meeting is duly convened. Mr. Secretary, have the stockholders of the corporation been duly notified of this meeting?
Yes, our stockholders have been duly notified of this meeting, Mr. Chairman. On March 28, 2023, by posting on our corporation's website and by disclosure to the Philippine Stock Exchange EDGE system, we distributed to our stockholders the notice and the definitive information statement for this annual stockholders meeting. In addition, the notice was published on April 2, 2023 in the Philippine Daily Inquirer and the Manila Bulletin, and on April 3, 2023 in the Business World and the Inquirer. Finally, Mr. Chairman, on April 6, 2023, we sent the notice together with a link to the information statement by email to all stockholders of record as of April 4, 2023, with email addresses on record. Accordingly, our stockholders have been duly notified of this meeting in accordance with our bylaws and the applicable rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Do we have a quorum at this meeting?
We have a quorum for this meeting, Mr. Chairman. Present in this meeting are stockholders owning at least 31,765,386,988 316,516 shares, representing 80.06% of the 39,667,394,773 total outstanding shares. They are present through their appointment of the chairman as proxy or by participation by remote communication or in the live webcast of this meeting or by electronic voting. The breakdown of the stockholders present in terms of mode of attendance will be reflected in the minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As we value our engagement with our stockholders, we encourage your active participation in this meeting through the various means to be discussed by our Corporate Secretary, Mr. Hermosura, as he shares the rules of conduct and procedures for this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, the rules of conduct and procedures for this meeting are set forth in the definitive information statement and in the explanation of agenda items which form part of the notice of this meeting. Please allow me to highlight the following points. First, our stockholders present through our live webcast may send their questions or comments to corpsec.acenergy.com.ph. Second, Mr. Doji Lagaso, our Assistant Corporate Secretary, will read the questions or comments received before 9:30 a.m. during the question and answer period, which will take place after other matters under item 10 of the agenda. Management will reply to questions and comments not taken up during the meeting by email. Third, as indicated in the ballot, there are 7 resolutions proposed for adoption by the stockholders in this meeting. Each proposed resolution will be shown on the screen as the same is being taken up. Fourth, stockholders could cast their votes on these proposed resolutions and in the election of directors beginning April 20, 2023 until the end of this meeting through the voting in absentia and shareholder system. Fifth and lastly, we have tabulated the votes cast as of April 14, 2023 after the end of the proxy validation process. Those votes are from stockholders owning 31,722,376,983 voting shares, representing 99.86% of the total voting shares represented in this meeting and 79.95% of the total outstanding voting shares. I will be referring to this preliminary tabulation when I report the voting results throughout this meeting. The results of the final tabulation with full details of the affirmative and negative votes and abstentions will be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the annual stockholders meeting held on April 25th, 2022. An electronic copy is available on the website of the corporation. I will now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolutions and the voting results on this item.
Mr. Chairman, management is proposing the adoption of resolution number S-2023-001 for the approval of the minutes of the annual meeting on April 25, 2022. We are showing the resolution on the screen. I am pleased to report that the stockholders owning 31,722,376,983 shares or 79.95% of the total outstanding shares and 99.86% of the shares represented in this meeting have voted in favor of the resolution. Therefore, resolution number S-2023-001 has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next item on the agenda is the annual report, which consists of the message from the chairman, the president's report, and an audio-visual presentation. My pre-recorded message will now be shown.
Fellow shareholders, the ACEN team, friends, good morning. I am privileged to have been elected into ACEN's board and as chairman in September of last year. I thank the board for entrusting me with this role of continuing ACEN's transformation that my predecessor Fernando Sobel de Ayala led with our president and CEO, John Eric Francia, and the ACEN leadership team. I congratulate Fernando who nurtured ACEN to become one of Ayala's core businesses. He empowered the management to undertake game-changing initiatives that contributed to addressing critical gaps in the industry, and more recently, leading the global effort towards clean energy transition. ACEN is fortunate to have had the foresight to make the strategic shift towards renewables when this space was still in its nascent stage. With the current global energy crisis accelerating, the demand for clean energy, ACEN is in strong position to capture the opportunities and to take a leading role in the renewables revolution. The board is excited about ACEN's growth trajectory. We will continue to actively engage the senior leadership in delivering execution excellence and building a strong team to ensure success. At the same time, amidst the scale of expansion, we will ensure that prudent risk management is exercised, including maintaining a strong balance sheet. Before I turn over the floor to our president, I would like to make special mention to our outgoing directors for their valuable contributions to ACEN. Ms. Sherisa Nesa, Ms. Consuelo Garcia, and Ms. Aurora Yelkina Garcia. Ms. Nesa has been our director since September 2019 and has chaired our risk management and related party transaction committee in addition to serving other various committees of the board. Ms. Consuelo Garcia has also been our director since September 2019 and has sat on several committees of the board, including chairing the Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee and the Personnel and Compensation Committee. Ms. Aurora Garcia has similarly been on the board since September 2019 and has served as chair of our Audit Committee. On behalf of all of ACEN, I thank them for their valuable insights and strong engagement on the board. In closing, I would like to thank the ACEN management team and all ACEN employees for the excellent work and passion that they have put into their organization. And you, our shareholders, business partners, and our many stakeholders for your continued trust and support. Thank you.
I now turn you over to our President and Chief Executive Officer, John Eric Francia.
Fellow shareholders, my colleagues on the board and management, and dear guests, good morning to all of you. We welcomed 2022 with renewed optimism as the world was reopening, and we saw this as an opportunity to prime ourselves for a post-pandemic recovery, and we ramped up our investments in renewable energy as we anticipated heightened electricity demand. However, this positive momentum was challenged by geopolitical events at the beginning of the year. The war in Ukraine caused shockwaves across the global energy market, triggering high fossil fuel prices and energy security issues. This also exacerbated the existing global supply chain challenges that led to the delay in some of the completion of our power plants. Nonetheless, we continue to execute on our renewables expansion across our key markets in the Philippines, Australia, Vietnam, India, and Indonesia. We concluded the year with over 4,000 megawatts of net attributable capacity, with 98% coming from renewable technologies. The Philippines continues to be our core market, accounting for about 40% of our generation portfolio, and we promptly responded to invest in new capacity amidst the tightening power supply brought about by the resurgent electricity demand and the declining Malampaya gas output. Overseas, Australia is our largest market, comprising 25% of our generation portfolio. This was cemented by our acquisition of the Australia Development Platform, resulting in our first full ownership of a development and operating platform outside of the Philippines. The revaluation gains booked from this transaction drove a significant jump in ACEN's reported net income of 13.1 billion pesos. However, EBITDA, which includes ACEN's share from non-consolidated associates and joint ventures, declined by 5% to 14.3 billion pesos in 2022. This was due to the challenges in Philippine operations on high cost of power, owing to our net merchant buying at high spot prices. This was, however, offset by the strong growth of our international operations, driven by new operating capacities in Vietnam and India. The global energy crisis has accelerated the demand for governments and businesses to adopt a sustainable development strategy, pushing renewable energy to an unprecedented level of importance. ACEN is excited to play a leading role in this historic shift towards a low-carbon future. At the end of 2022, ACEN has around 2,400 megawatts of capacity under construction, majority of which will be operational within 2023. Of this amount, we're currently building around 1,000 megawatts of renewables in the Philippines alone, and this will add much-needed capacity in the country and allow ACEN to have surplus energy and expands its customer base in the country. We're moving forward with our commitment to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which fully supports our ongoing growth and decarbonization strategy. We recently completed our net zero roadmap, which includes near-term emission reduction targets aligned with the GHG protocol and the latest climate science. It also includes long-term targets consistent with a deep decarbonization of the power sector. We're very proud to say that ACEN is the first energy company in Southeast Asia to take this critical step towards achieving net zero with a transparent framework for monitoring progress. ACEN recognizes that to reach net zero outcome for the power sector, it will need to rely on both emissions reduction and neutralization of residual emissions. As part of this transition plan, ACEN aims to deliver reduction-led decarbonization by 2040 with an interim target for 2030 and a net zero status by 2050. This 2050 goal is in line with a broader Ayala Group net zero target, while ACEN will continue to explore opportunities to further accelerate these targets in the future. And while we are strongly committed to transitioning out of coal-fired generation, we believe that this must be done in a responsible manner. In an emerging market such as the Philippines, where coal plants are still inevitable until the next few decades, we must take into account the tightness in power supply and the economic relevance of thermal plants in the near to medium term. With this in mind, we implemented a just energy transition by adopting the principles of the Energy Transition Mechanism, or ETM, a framework promoted by the Asian Development Bank in this part of the world as a responsible divestment of our thermal assets and transition to cleaner technology. We completed the full divestment of the South Luzon Thermal Energy Corporation coal plant using the ETM framework, the first of its kind in the world. This landmark transaction will enable the early retirement and transition to a clean technology of the 246 megawatt coal plant in Batangas by 2040. This reduces its 50-year operating life by half and avoids up to 50 million metric tons of carbon emissions. This transaction, which ensures an effective workforce evolution, community resilience, and collaboration with stakeholders, generated 7.2 billion pesos in proceeds, which will be reinvested by ACEN into renewable energy projects. Being at the forefront of energy transition renders ACEN a natural participant of sustainable finance. In 2022, we issued our maiden peso-denominated green bonds amounting to 10 billion pesos. This will finance over 500 megawatts of solar projects in the Philippines. Despite stepping up our funding initiatives, we're able to maintain healthy leverage ratios. We ended the year with a net DE ratio of 0.2 times, which provides ample capacity to fund new investments. The global energy crisis triggered an urgent need for secure, reliable, and affordable electricity supply. We saw this as an opportune time for ACEN to turbocharge its growth and help address the capacity challenge we're facing today. In August 2022, we announced ACEN 2030, which is our bold aspiration to reach 20 gigawatts of attributable renewables capacity by 2030. This represents a 25% compounded annual growth rate up to the end of the decade. The Philippines will remain as ACEN's core market, with Australia remaining as the second largest market. And in addition, we will continue to grow our presence in Vietnam, Indonesia, and India. Solar and wind will remain our core technologies, complemented by investments in the new technologies such as battery, energy storage, floating solar, and offshore wind. And as what we have done over the past decade, this ambitious goal will be implemented by leveraging strategic partnerships with global and regional developers, with multinational energy firms, as well as local business groups, developers, and landowners. ACEN 2030 is an aggressive goal, but with a strong commitment and support of a highly energized organization, strong balance sheet, robust pipeline of projects, and solid partnerships, we believe that we have the fundamentals in place to succeed. Going forward, while we continue to see a challenging market domestically amidst the tight power supply situation and elevated fossil fuel prices, the significant addition to our renewables operating capacity by the middle of 2023 will help augment the country's energy supply as well as bolster ACEN's financial performance. Before I end my report, I would like to make a special mention to our former chairman, Mr. Fernando Zobel de Ayala, and vice chairman, Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala, who stepped down from the board last year. Fernando and Jaime's stewardship inspired the management team to constantly aim high, taking prudent risks with a long-term view for success. They guided us with a constancy of purpose, balancing economics with tangible, lasting impact on society and the environment. On behalf of all my colleagues, we thank Fernando and Jaime for having consistently championed ACEN throughout the years. Their remarkable stewardship has laid the foundation as we steer ACEN into the next phase of growth and transformation. We also welcome the opportunity to work with our new board leadership led by our chairman, Delphine Lazaro, and vice chairman, Cesar Bong Consing. In closing, I thank our board of directors for its guidance, our management team, and all of our employees for their strong engagement and rigor, our business partners, shareholders, and our many stakeholders for their continued trust and support.
Mr. Secretary, please present the proposed resolution and the voting results on this item.
Mr. Chairman, management is proposing the adoption of resolution number S-2023-002 for the noting of the corporation's annual report and the approval of the consolidated audited financial statements of the corporation and its subsidiaries and the parent company financial statements of the corporation as of December 31, 2022, as audited by its external auditor, CSIP Gores Belayo and Company. We are showing the resolution on the screen. I am pleased to report, Mr. Chairman, that the stockholders owning 376,983 shares, or 79.95% of the total outstanding shares, and 99.86% of the shares represented in this meeting have voted for the adoption of the resolution. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, resolution number S-2023-002 has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We now move to the next item in the agenda, the ratification and approval of all the acts of our Board of Directors, the Executive Committee, other committees, and our officers since our annual stockholders meeting last April 25th, 2022 until today. Mr. Hermosura will explain this matter and present the proposed resolution together with the results thereon.
Mr. Chairman, our board and management seek ratification of all the acts and resolutions adopted from April 25, 2022 until today of the board, executive committee, and other board committees exercising power delegated by the board, which resolutions and actions were adopted from April 25, 2022 until today. These acts and resolutions are reflected in the minutes of the meetings, and they include the election of new directors and appointment of new officers and chairman of the board, appointment of signatories, treasury transactions, investments, and acts and resolutions covered by disclosures to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Philippine Stock Exchange. Stockholders' ratification is also sought for all the acts of the corporation's officers performed in accordance with our bylaws and with the resolutions of the board, the executive committee, and other board committees from April 25, 2022 to date. These acts were performed to implement the resolutions of the board or its committees or as part of the corporation's general conduct of its business. Mr. Chairman, we are showing on the screen resolution number S-2023-003. I am pleased to report that stockholders owning 31,643,220,621 shares, or 79.75% of the total outstanding shares, and 99.62% of the shares represented in this meeting have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2023-003. Therefore, the resolution has been adopted.
Thank you. The next item in the agenda is the proposed amendment to the corporation's Articles of Incorporation. Mr. Francia, President of the corporation, will explain this item.
Mr. Chairman, our Board of Directors has approved for endorsement to the stockholders the proposed amendment to the Articles of Incorporation of the corporation to create preferred shares via reclassification of 100 million unissued common shares with a par value of 1 peso per share into 100 million preferred shares with a par value of 1 peso per share. The preferred shares shall have the following features. Item A, may be issued from time to time in one or more series and/or tranches, and under such terms and conditions for each series and/or tranche as determined by the Board of Directors, with authority expressly granted to the Board of Directors, subject to the provisions of this Article 7, to establish and designate series and/or tranches, and to fix the number of shares to be included in each series and/or tranche, and the relative rights, preferences, and limitations of the shares of each such series and/or tranche. To the extent not set forth in this Article 7, the terms of each such series shall be specified in the resolution adopted by the Board of Directors pursuant to the authority granted providing for the issuance of such shares. A certificate containing such terms and conditions shall be filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission and made publicly available. Item B, may be offered and issued in Philippine peso or in US dollar, as may be determined by the Board of Directors and subject to regulatory requirements. Item C, with issue value to be determined by the Board of Directors at the time of issuance. Item D, with dividend rate to be determined by the Board of Directors at the time of issuance. Item E, cumulative in payment of current and unpaid back dividends. Item F, non-voting except for matters mandatorily required by the law. Item G, non-participating in any other further cash, property, or stock dividends beyond that specifically determined at the time of issuance, and distribution of corporate assets beyond the issue price specifically determined at the time of issuance. Item H, non-convertible to common shares. Item I, with preference over holders of common stock in the distribution of corporate assets and in the payment of dividends at the rate specified at the time of issuance. Item J, with no preemptive rights to any issue of shares, whether common or preferred shares. Item K, redeemable at the option of the corporation under such terms that the Board of Directors may approve at the time of issuance. And item L, reissuable under such terms that the Board of Directors may approve at the time of reissuance. This proposed amendment, Mr. Chair, is meant, among others, to diversify the corporation's sources of funding and to enable access to a wider base of institutional and retail investors. This additional source of funding will enable the corporation to increase its asset base and build more power plants that can generate more revenues for the corporation, which will ultimately benefit the stockholders. Since the preferred shares to be issued will not exceed 35% of the resulting total issued and outstanding capital stock of the corporation, stockholders shall not have any preemptive rights with respect to the issuance of the preferred shares in accordance with the second paragraph of Article 7 of the Articles of Incorporation. In accordance with the revised Corporation Code, a stockholder who votes against this proposed amendment may exercise his or her right of appraisal, which is detailed in our information statement.
Thank you. May I now ask the Secretary to present the proposed resolution and the voting results?
Mr. Chairman, our board is endorsing for the approval of our stockholders resolution number S-2023-004 for the following reasons. 1. Creation of preferred shares via the reclassification of 100 million unissued common shares into 100 million preferred shares, and the amendment of the 7th article of the Articles of Incorporation for this purpose. And second, the registration under the Securities Regulation Code and listing with the Philippine Stock Exchange of the preferred shares that will be issued out of the reclassification. Stockholders owning 43,879,046 shares, or 78.24% of the total outstanding shares, and 97.73% of the shares represented in this meeting have voted for the adoption of the resolution. Given this, Mr. Chairman, resolution number S-2023-004 has been approved.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the issuance, either through a public offering or a private placement, of up to 25 million preferred shares in Philippine peso or US dollars, and the listing of such preferred shares with the stock exchange. Mr. Francia, the President, will explain this item.
Mr. Chairman, during its meeting on March 7, 2023, the Board of Directors approved the establishment of a 50 million preferred shares shelf program subject to regulatory approvals. The Board also approved, as the first tranche of such preferred shares, the issuance of up to 25 million preferred shares in Philippine peso or in US dollars in one or several series, and the listing of such preferred shares with the Philippine Stock Exchange, including the reissuance and relisting of such preferred shares following their redemption in accordance with the terms thereof. Since the shares to be issued do not exceed 35% of the resulting total issued and outstanding capital stock of the corporation, stockholders shall not have any preemptive rights with respect to the proposed issuance.
Thank you. I'll now ask our secretary to present the proposed resolution and the voting results on this item.
Mr. Chairman, our board is endorsing for approval of our stockholders resolution number S-2023-005 for the following corporate actions. First, the issuance of up to 25 million preferred shares, whether in one or various series, on such terms as may be jointly determined by the President and the Chief Finance Officer of the corporation. And second, registration under the Securities Regulation Code and listing with the Philippine Stock Exchange of such shares to be issued, including a reissuance and relisting of such preferred shares following their redemption in accordance with the terms thereof, and the filing of respective applications for registration, exemption, and listing with the SEC and the PSE for such reissued preferred shares. We are showing the resolution on the screen. Mr. Chairman, stockholders owning 31,045,895,908 shares, or 78.25% of the total outstanding shares, and 97.74% of the shares represented in this meeting have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2023-005. Therefore, the resolution has been adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next order of business is the election of the 11 members of the Board of Directors for the ensuing year. Mr. Remusura will explain this.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with our bylaws, Manual of Corporate Governance, and the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the following stockholders were duly nominated to the Board of Directors of the corporation for the ensuing term. Nominated as regular directors, Jose Rene Gregory D. Almendras, Cesar P. Consing, Jaime Alfonso Sobel de Ayala, John Eric Francia, Delphine L. Lazaro, Nicole Go Pek Kim, Dean L. Travers. Nominated as independent directors, Jess Ang, Maria Lourdes Eras de Leon, Gary Lester, and Melinda Ocampo. The Corporate Governance and Nomination Committee of the Board, in accordance with our bylaws and Manual of Corporate Governance, has ascertained that all the 11 duly nominated stockholders, including the nominees for independent directors, are qualified to serve as directors of the corporation for the ensuing term. All the nominees have given their consent to their nominations.
Mr. Secretary, may we have the results?
Mr. Chairman, each of the 11 nominees for director has garnered at least 31,624,503,425 votes. Given this, I certify that each of the nominees has received enough votes for election to the board, and that resolution number S-2023-006, as shown on the screen, has been approved.
Thank you. At this point, we would like to again recognize our outgoing independent directors, Ms. Sherisa P. Nuesa, Ms. Consuelo D. Garcia, and Ms. Maria Aurora Jotina Garcia. Ms. Nuesa, Garcia, and Jotina Garcia have served as independent directors since September 2019 and the corporation has greatly benefited from their collective wisdom and dedication. The corporation has been privileged to have you three as independent directors for the past 3.5 years. On behalf of management and the corporation, thank you very much, and we wish each of you the best. To our new independent directors, Mr. Jesse Ang, Ms. Maria Lourdes Eras de Leon, and Mr. Gary Lester, on behalf of all members of the board, we wish you a warm welcome. The next item in the agenda is the election of the corporation's external auditor. Mr. Hermosura will explain this item and present the resolution and the voting results.
Mr. Chairman, in the performance of its oversight function over ACEN's external auditor, the Audit Committee of our board evaluated the performance of our present auditor, the firm of CCIP Gores Velayo and Company, during the past year, and the committee was satisfied with their performance. The committee and the board of directors have agreed to endorse for our stockholders' approval the appointment of CCIP Gores Velayo and Company as the corporation's external auditor for the present fiscal year for an audit fee of 2,500,000 pesos, exclusive of value-added tax and out-of-pocket expenses. Mr. Chairman, we are showing on the screen resolution number S-2023-007. I am pleased to report, Mr. Chairman, that the stockholders owning 31,625,968,050 shares, or 79.71% of the total outstanding shares, and 99.56% of the shares represented in this meeting have voted for the adoption of resolution number S-2023-007. Therefore, the resolution is now approved.
Thank you. Are there other matters that require consideration by the stockholders?
There is none, Mr. Chairman, but if I may just mention that our stockholders were given the opportunity to submit proposals for agenda item, but we did not receive any.
But there are questions and comments. We will now address them. Our Assistant Corporate Secretary, Mr. Lagaso, will read aloud the questions and comments together with the names of the stockholders who sent them. As mentioned by Mr. Hermosura earlier, management will reply by email to questions and comments not taken up during this meeting. Doji?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We received the following question from a stockholder who identified herself as Nympha Perez. Her question goes, why is there a planned preferred share issuance?
Mr. President, would you like to address that question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as mentioned earlier, issuing preferred shares allows us to diversify our funding mix and also improves our capital structure and our leverage ratios in preparation for future financing initiatives to meet our rapid growth trajectory. We've seen that Philippine investors, both institutional and retail, now have an appetite for preferred share investments, so we're tapping into this pool of liquidity to fund our growth. We think now is a good time to offer preferred shares to give new investors steady, predictable, and competitive returns versus other instruments in the market. Please note that these preferred shares are non-dilutive, given that they are also non-voting.
Thank you. Mr. Assistant Corporate Secretary, any other question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. A second question was sent to us, and this was sent by a stockholder named Jennifer Lim. She asks, you are expanding aggressively overseas. Does this mean ACEN will focus less on the Philippines?
Eric, would you like to answer that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. International expansion is obviously a part of our strategy to accelerate growth and diversify our portfolio. However, the Philippines shall remain our home market and shall continue to be our core and largest market. We're very supportive of the Philippine government's renewable energy goals, particularly of reaching 35% share of output by 2030. And we estimate, in line with this, around 18 gigawatts of new renewable capacity will need to be built in the Philippines in the next 8 years or for the balance of the decade. And as such, out of the 20 gigawatt aspiration that is ACEN is targeting to build by 2030, we expect around 8 gigawatts or 40% to be in the Philippines. In fact, we have added over 1,000 megawatts of new renewable capacity in the country just in the last 2 years. And again, we remain supportive and appreciative of the government's policies, particularly the green energy auction and the green energy option programs that are now in effect in the market.
Thank you. Doji, any other question?
One last question, Mr. Chairman. This time from a stockholder identifying herself as Ludi Polido. She emailed the following question. ACEN has been growing its presence in Australia. Which countries are you expanding to next?
Eric, again?
Yes, if I may, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have recently announced 2 transactions that expand the geographic reach of the company. The first is that we participated in a consortium to build the 600 megawatt monsoon wind project in Lao PDR. It's a cross-border deal as the project will be supplying electricity to EVN in Vietnam, and it is expected to be the largest renewable energy project on the cross-border transaction space. And this is very exciting and could provide a lot of catalyst for such cross-border transactions in Southeast Asia. We've also previously announced a transaction in the United States where we signed a partnership with Pivot Gen with the aim of repowering existing wind farms in the US. This group was introduced to us by UPC, which is an existing partner. And with Pivot Gen, we recently acquired a portfolio of 8 wind farms in the US worth 136 megawatts. It's still very early days for us, and we're still waiting for the regulatory approvals. But suffice it to say that we're very excited for the prospects for the US market.
Mr. Chairman, that was the last question that we received prior to the cut-off time.
Thank you to our stockholders. The link to the audio and video recording of this meeting will be posted on our website. Stockholders may raise issues, clarifications, and concerns about this meeting within 2 weeks from posting of the link by sending an email to corpsec.acen@acenergy.com.ph. That concludes this morning's proceedings. The meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you, everyone.